Welcome to part 5 of the 300 Blackout from start to finish tutorial. I'm going to show you some things that we're going to need to complete our next task. And first of all, we're going to need the brass. And this is the brass. Well, I made a lot more than what you guys saw me do. But this is ready to go in terms of it just needs to be primed, filled up with powder, beld, all that good stuff. But this is ready to go, seating the projectile. So we've got a brass. We're going to need some primers, of course. This is essential to the next step. We're going to need our priming arm, specifically for the Lee Challenger press. And I love this press. It's a really nice one for pretty cheap. And I'm going to be using the Universal Expanding Die by Lee. And I know I said there's no such thing as a universal die, which there isn't. This is just for most cases. It has a nice little adjusting feature up here for small incremental adjustments. You do not need this if you're going to be reloading jacketed ammunition. You only need this if you're going to be doing cast projectiles, hard cast, or just soft lead projectiles. But I use hard cast lead projectiles, so I will be using this. So I'll show you how to do that. But skip this step if you're not using lead projectiles. And that doesn't mean like the jacketed projectiles over lead. That just means if it's just lead, and I mean it's a mixture of a few different alloys and stuff to produce the stuff I'm calling lead projectiles. But you don't need this if you're using jacketed ammunition, and make sure you know what jacketed ammunition is before you start this step. Okay, so we're going to need our shell holder, of course. This is a number 4 shell holder by Lee, and you can use any shell holder that is compatible 223 and 556. We're going to need some kind of tool to occasionally remove a primer crimp, and I like to use a countersink, and you can get these for 50 cents at some kind of tool store, and and then a drill if you're going to be using a countersink or like a tool. And of course, eye protection. Anytime you're around explosive materials or metal shavings or anything like that, you want to wear eye protection. And I'm a big advocate of eye protection, and also hearing protection. I do not approve of people shooting without hearing protection. It seems foolish. Anyway, so let's get to it. I'm going to set the camera up, and I'm going to also show you how to set up this die and how to set up our press here for the next step. Okie dokie. Okay, first of all, this is the die that we're going to be using for the expanding process. Again, you do not need to do this if you're using jacketed ammunition or projectiles. So I'm not going to put the ring off or take the ring off because you see what that is. But this is for sort of like larger cases or larger mouths. This is sort of for like the smaller mouths, and this is the one we're going to be using. How you set this up for the 300 Blackout, or at least how I like to expand the next, is you put the small one in first, and you put the large one on top with the nose facing towards the bottom of the die. And then you just literally screw this back on. And how we're going to be using it is we're just going to go all the way tight with it, because I already have this set up to where this is how much I want it expanded. But I will show you how to set it up. So actually, we'll just start over. So we'll start this ring off at the top position. So first of all, when I'm using this system here, this quick detach system, and for those of you that haven't watched the other videos, they have no threading here for 3 different portions of the die seating ring. So this is actually what allows me or us to connect the die to the press for this particular press, the Lee Challenger. Anyway, so and then there's this little cutaway right here that lines up with this little notch. I don't use this notch. I don't use the quick detach function. I use this as like sort of a standard threaded press. So if I were to put this on here like this, what I do is I bypass, so the little detent here raises up here, right? So I bypass that. I push it in and go as far as I can, and that allows me to make it to where all of my dies are the same every time I install the next die for the next process. And you can get some pliers and then wrench it down a little bit. But the reason I do this is because, you know, unless you have a lot of these collars, if that's what you'd call it, and if you only have one, there's no point in having the quick detach system. So I only have one, so I use it just mainly as a regular threading on my press. So what we want to do is install our shell holder, and we just take our shell holder, and there's this little, you know, portion like where it's cut away, and it'll just slide in. And it doesn't matter the orientation; it's your preference, you know, which way you want it to face. I typically like to put it to my left because I like to enter the cases from the left side here. Then we want to enter a case into the shell holder, and then we want to install our die here. So we want to just leave it loose until we get it to where we want it, right? Okay, so we're gonna go up, and we need to go all the way up with our case inside here, and a ramrod all the way up until we feel it connect or touch to the top of the case. So I'm feeling it right there. It's coming to a stop, right? So I want to start releasing the ramrod and then going a little bit deeper each time until I get to where I can seat my projectile. And for this, we're going to be using just, we'll use some random projectile here, just for a test here. Now this is a Missouri Bullet Company 245 grain projectile. This is their non-powder coated version, so they do have the lube rings filled with the lubrication, so when it goes through your barrel, it kind of coats the barrel until the bullet exits. So we'll be using this just for to test fitting, and it does have a flat base, so you do need to have the mouth of the case belled out appropriately, otherwise you're going to shave your projectile. You don't want to shave the lead because it helps foul out your bore, and it also leads to less potential accuracy, and also there's less weight to the projectile. So, you know, if you want consistency from round to round, you want to leave this as intact as possible. Anyway, okay, so we're starting to feel the neck expand a little bit, right? So every once in a while, we're going to take our case out here and just test to see if we can fit this in. Which this is very way too small. Like, I guarantee you this would shave all the way up on this projectile. So we're gonna put it back in our shell holder and then screw down a little bit more on our die, and we want to do it just very incrementally, just to where we get it to where we want it, and test fitment, because every projectile is going to be a little bit different. Even if it says it's you know, the same weight or the same diameter, everything's going to be a little bit different, you know, because everyone's tooling and process is different. So just keep on testing it, and it's starting to fit and slide in, but we want it to make sure it will slide in without shaving. And we can remove this bell in the very last process called crimping. So this is looking pretty good. So see how it doesn't, there's a little bit of a, you can't really see, but there's a little bit of a gap. And we want that little bit of a gap so we can ensure that this will not shave. And we can remove that gap later on. As long as we don't open up the entire neck and we just open up the top portion, it'll squeeze itself in. And so anyway, so this is looking pretty good. I'm going to do it a little bit more because I don't know from projectile to projectile if it's going to be appropriate. So now we have our handle all the way in the down position and our ramrod all the way up. So at this point, we want to hold it here, and we want to slowly tighten our ring so as not to disrupt its positioning. And we want to do it all the way until it's dead tight. And then this will be our setting for the rest of our our belling process. And we do want to check occasionally, every once in a while, maybe with different projectiles, just in case, you know, this one might be a little bit different from the next one. We want to test to see if it'll still fit, to see if your die moved, or maybe the projectiles are a little bit larger than you anticipated, just so you don't get too far ahead of yourself and make it to where you know, you have to basically restart all over. Okay, so our die is solid in there. We check again to make sure it fits and we're not insane, and that's going to be fine. So we check with another piece of brass to see if it does the same, because every time you trim the brass, each neck from case to case is going to be a little bit different. So we don't know how much this belling is going to affect each individual piece of brass. Okay, and you want to go all the way down every time just to make sure, and that is looking great. Okay, so this would be perfectly acceptable for these projectiles. If you're doing a wide variety of projectiles, and some of them have like boat tail bases, or maybe they're a little bit larger, like this is a 309 diameter bullet, but you know, they for hard lead casts and stuff, sometimes they do oversized just to alleviate some issues you get with some undersized hard cast lead projectiles. I like 311 personally, and but this is a 309, so we can actually, let's continue on, but just keep that in mind. If you have a wide variety of projectiles you want to use, make sure and test all of them before you proceed to you know, just belt these out. Anyway, okay, so next we want to install our priming arm, and with this particular press, this is how it works. There's a little pin that in the middle of our ramrod here, and I'll get a close-up of it. But there's a little pin, and we just line up this little gap here on the back with the pin and seat it in there. And it's pretty hard to get that wrong. I don't know of anyone. You want to test your to make sure it releases like this, because it'll be a pain in the boots if it sticks every time. So you want to make sure and have everything cleaned as much as possible, just so it doesn't stick. Make sure nothing's bent. Okay, so at this point, I'll throw this back in there because we can. This we're going to want to set our primers out, right? And typically you want all your primers to face, you know, the part that the firing pin is going to strike. You want that part to face towards you when you flip these over. Nice thing about these little primer boxes is you can flatten them out, and then you can apply them on the top surface of this little container, and then flip it over. And then, if in a perfect world, all these primers would be in the proper positioning, then you can slide this out. If you're going to be using a bowl or some kind of metal surface, you know, you can do that. But it kind of like leaves in a nice little pattern. And I have some of these flipped around and stuff. And these are some primers I took out of some pulled cartridges that I made that I wasn't satisfied with. So anyway, you can throw that stuff away. Now, let's start the process here. So the first part, as long as you're not using full metal jacket or jacketed projectiles, is to bell. Okay, so we belled. At this point, when the ramrod is up, the thing that I found works the best is if you insert kind of overhand, like a kind of lean over overhand, insert the primer in the priming arm. And then you want to push on your projectile to make sure it's all the way in the middle. And then you want to slowly push. If you feel any resistance, which I do, I feel resistance right now, you want to back off. Make sure that your primer is still in the priming arm. And then you want to check the base here to make sure there's no crimp. And there is a crimp here. So what we can do is we can use our priming crimp removal tool, and we can do it by hand, or we can do the easy thing and use the drill. And I'm going to put on my glasses for this because I don't want metal shavings. So we just literally hit the back of it, and you'll get a feel for it after a while. You'll know when's too much and when's too little. And I like to kind of swirl it around a little bit. We just want to remove this little, that's probably sufficient. We just want to remove enough of the material around, just to make it to where we can slide the primer in, you know, uninterrupted. So let's test this out, and we will feel, okay. So it's still pretty tough, and our primer is we would have need to remove more of the primer crimp, but we need to go a little bit tougher on that. And I don't actually like this one, so I'll probably put this one aside. So we'll just use as an example, like there are some times you're gonna have to deconstruct your work. Okay, so let's try this one out. I'm going to bell it out, insert our primer, and slowly bring it back down. Didn't feel much resistance, and that's looking pretty good. And you want to make sure that your primer, depending on which primers you're using, if you're using like some of the foreign primers, they might seat a little bit deeper, but the CCIs, they have what's called the anvil. You can't really see it, but the little gold thing in there, the anvil isn't all the way seated, I think. Let's see. Yeah, they're sticking out a little bit. But depending on your primer choice, sometimes your primer will be a little bit sunken in from what you're familiar with. But with these, they're flush. So if you're using CCI, I think typically they will be flush. But that is a completed case, and this is ready to seat the projectile and put the charge of powder. Okay, so typically you'd want like a bowl, or you know, I'm actually not going to use this dirty ass bowl. Excuse the language, but we'll use something. We'll use this bowl for now, just to differentiate our completed cases from our incomplete cases. Let's try the next one. And my primer arm's sticking. I think it's because I dropped it and I kind of bent it. But it is belled, and I feel resistance. And the primer actually, that's the mistake you don't want to have happen, but the primer actually is in the tube right now, and it's going to kick it out. So I'm going to save this primer. And typically, with every press, there's a priming system that's built in, and sometimes it's better than others. But anyway, this one works fine for me. I have a lot of people that I've seen complain about this particular priming system. But anyway, so let's remove this crimp. Okay, so do a little bit more to ensure. We just want to make it to where it slides in easy. Nice and shiny. Okay, and we do want to test occasionally, like every once in a while. Okay, so that one slid in fine. We do want to test every once in a while to make sure that our projectile fits appropriately, which this does. So this is another completed case. But so just the main thing is to really look for resistance, you know, and keep in mind that you don't want to force things because you'll ruin your primers. And they're dirt cheap, you know, they're like roughly 3 cents, you know, a piece, something like that. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending on your choice. But they are components that are valuable, you know, like, because you can't always get a hold of this stuff, and there are times when there are droughts on components. That one slid in very nicely. And so another thing to look out for is, I'm testing a little bit too much here, but I'm wanting to drill home that you do need to test every once in a while, just and you don't want to be completely confident in any one part of your process 100%, because that's how you get complacent. But so there are times when your primer pocket is too large. It's maybe you picked it up off the ground, and maybe it's been reloaded maybe 10 times or more, or maybe it's just a very low quality type of brass, and it hasn't held up that well. You know, maybe it's just a bad batch of brass from the particular company. You want to make sure that if it's too loose, you want to like tap it on a hard surface, or try to dislodge it somehow without actually, you know, hitting the primer on something hard. I'm hitting the corner here. But sometimes I've run into a couple cases like where the primer will actually just fall out if I tap it on the table or something like that. You know, make sure you don't hit it up against something that could potentially make the primer go off. It's not gonna like kill you or anything, but it'll be loud and unnecessary, and you'll waste a primer possibly. It's not necessarily like hugely dangerous. There's no gunpowder in there, and it's not like, you know, most likely you're not going to get injured from that. I'd venture to say not many people have been injured by a primer. Anyway, but yeah, if it is too loose, that can cause problems. There are times like when I've run into very loose primer pockets, and they'll just stay in and they'll fire fine, and then I'll reload them again and they'll be fine. So you do it at your own discretion. But if, you know, what is the saying? When in doubt, throw it out. Like, sometimes that applies, and I'm feeling some resistance here. Confirm that the primer is still on the priming arm. That's good to go for the next one. Sometimes it is best if it's that questionable. That's good. If it's that questionable, it is just a piece of brass, and if you think it's dangerous, you know, go by your own judgment, because you are ultimately in charge of your own safety, and you do want to be responsible. And okay, so with this typical priming, or with this priming system, I typically get little shavings of the primer sometimes, and that's not a huge deal, and they run fine. But so with this system, I can just literally pull it back like a sleeve and then release it. And this is good to have eye protection because I've been hit in the face with these a bunch of times. But the little shaving will just pop right out. And I'm not sure this works for any other system, you know, but do lower the sleeve, and you can wipe it off with your finger if that doesn't work for you. But I found that it works every time if I just pull it back and let it snap forward, and it removes that shaving. So what happens if you leave that shaving inside this priming tool, this priming arm? I'll show you what happens. I'll just explain it to you. So basically what happens is when you seat the primer with a shaving of a different primer, you actually can dent your primer. And I don't think it would be a huge problem for most guns, because I've left a couple dented primers in my batches and they fired without flaw. But I can see the potential if maybe you have a little bit off-spec gun, or maybe your firing pin is extremely worn, maybe it won't reach the primer. I don't know. And I don't know if that's a real possibility, but I can imagine the possibility. So I would recommend removing any shavings from the priming arms when you get the chance or when you see it. But like I said, it's not a huge deal. You know, if you're loading self-defense ammunition, maybe it's a huge deal, and you want it to be as you know, consistent from round to round as possible. I can see that being a huge deal. And you want to ensure that you do everything possible to make that round go off without a hitch. Okay, I understand that. For plinking ammo, I don't think it's a huge deal. So that's also one of the reasons, like, why, you know, I'm loading this 100% for plinking ammo. I tend to leave the factory ammunition for self-defense stuff, stuff that I don't know, there's some legal things that are possible that could happen if you were to use reloaded ammunition for self-defense. I can't think of a single case, but I can think that you know, there are times maybe if you load a crazy hot round, and you know, or maybe a really underpowered round, and it hurts someone, and maybe you know, you're using it as self-defense, like they might have a case against you. So do watch out for that, and do your own research on that. I don't think there have been any cases like where reloaded ammunition was part of someone's, oh, I just dropped a primer, part of someone's incarceration or anything like that. But again, you know, I haven't been concerned enough about that to heavily research that. I just lost that primer, but not a huge deal. As I said, they're about 3 cents each. I would have preferred not to have lost that. Another thing, I'm feeling resistance. Another thing I want to get to, okay, I'm going to have to power that one because I couldn't get it off. You know what? That might have left the shaving. Let's see. It did not. Another thing I want to go over is when you're using the priming arm, the spent primers actually come out the side here in this little pool area, and it goes through a hole in the press, and you can actually put a garbage underneath your press to capture all the spent primers if you don't want to have to sweep them up afterwards. They kind of go everywhere, but sometimes they don't reliably go in the garbage either, or they get stuck in this little pool area. But that's something to note, that if you're using the priming system on your press, that most of them feature like a spent primer ejection kind of a thing, and you can make use of that and have a little bit cleaner setup, if you so choose. But this is really all there is to this step here. I want to emphasize again that it is not necessary to bail out your cases with full metal jacket ammunition. I mean, I suppose you could, for whatever reasons. Maybe you just can't fit your ammunition in your cases, or something is a little bit off spec where you need to bail it out. I'd say have one of these expanding dies on hand anyway, so you have the option to use cast lead projectiles. Whether you're making your own or purchasing them online or from a friend, whoever makes them or something, I think it's great as an option, and I'm sure you could use it for other reloading tasks as well. So I do recommend one of these. I think they're like 13, 14 bucks. They're not expensive, and they'll last probably a lifetime. Okay, so let's say you mess up, right? And you're not satisfied with got the primer out. You're not satisfied with maybe your primer got flattened out because you ended up getting stuck and you had to force it in to release the thing. I have that happen even through the thousands of rounds I've reloaded. So let's say that happens. Let's say you get your primer in and you're not satisfied with it. It's like all flattened out and weird looking. Just literally pop your sizing or decapping die. You can just use a plain decapping, a universal decapping die, and pop that primer back out. You can, just throw that one away if it's that big of a deal, or you can try to reuse it or salvage it. I recommend just throwing it away if it's bad enough that you want to deconstruct what you did. You can do that, or let's say this gets stuck here, right? I haven't. Oh, I should have accidentally got that stuck on purpose. Okay, let's get this one stuck on purpose, right? So we'll just do it like kind of halfway. Okay. Oh, no, I did it too much. Okay, so we'll pretend this is stuck because I can't seem to get one to stick on purpose, right? We can just remove the entire assembly here, the entire shell holder, and you literally can get a punch or just a nail or something, go through that little hole you see there, and you can punch out the primer manually. Now for me, I would probably use a punch and just find one that fits in the flash hole, like that one does right there, and you could push it out with your hand if it's in there weak enough, or you can hammer it out. It's not going to blow up. And this one's kind of stuck in there. And we'll use a little hammer. Typically don't want to do it by your primers and bounce them around. There you go. And there's the primer. And this one's fine to be reused. I got no qualms about reusing primers that I extracted out of there. Yeah, so then you just reinstall your shell holder and make the correction with the case. Bore it out a little bit, and then you got yourself usable. Oh, okay. Now we got a little shaving here. See that little we have a little half moon of a shaving. So I'm going to do worst case scenario. I got my glasses off for a second. I'm going to do worst case scenario. We will put it directly in the middle. There we go. We'll see if we can get we can replicate some of the things that we've done in the past here. Okay, so we push it down, and it didn't do it, of course. Okay, we'll try another one. And just dropped another damn primer. My hands are kind of cold. It's pretty cold in here. Okay. I turned the heater off just so you guys could hear me. Okay, right there. Now see? Might have to do a photo of this. Okay, you can kind of see it. The primer is dented right there. You can see it. Now, while I feel like this would have no problem firing, there are people that I know of that this would not be acceptable. So, just literally pop your decapping die or your decapping full-length sizing die, or you can do it by hand like I just showed you, and pop that primer back out. And yeah, but I'm fine with that. I don't condone that, but I don't want to waste that primer, and I've had success with them going bang many times. Anyway, so just literally peel back, pop it off, and there goes the old shaving. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something from it. Stay tuned for part 6, where we will be seating our projectile and, charging the case first with gunpowder of our choice, and going over some other things like calibrating your powder measure, or some different methods that we can use to charge the case. Like you can do it the old-fashioned way by hand, or you can do it with a powder measure or a powder throw. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.